and I would like to introduce our second speaker, Nick Thieberger, who will talk to us about improving access to and sustainability of the Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources in Endangered Cultures, PARADISEC. I'll just give you a bit of more of an introduction, Nick. The Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources in Endangered Cultures holds records from 1,370 small languages, mainly audio recordings made since the 1950s. It has 16,000 hours of audio in 230 terabytes of material in 428,000 files stored in Amazon S3. This initiative is to move all items to Research Object Crate format. RO Crate allows the whole collection to contain self-describing items, so it makes it more durable over time and less reliant on a catalogue that is at risk of failure, with consequent metadata loss. This also means that they can be delivered on Wi-Fi from a Raspberry Pi device, even in remote offline locations. So now I'll hand over to you, Nick.
Thanks very much, Robin, and congratulations to all the other prize winners as well. It is quite humbling to get this award, and also to just see that the coverage that being part of this has given us, which is really wonderful. I want to begin by acknowledging that I live and work on the lands of the Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and pay my respects to them and their elders. So I'll talk to you about PARADISEC. And I want to start by thinking about PARADISEC serves particular needs, and I think these are needs that we all have. And when I say we, I'm talking really about researchers in academia, but the flip side of that is how researchers in academia can provide information for the broader public. So what we really need is a nationally funded and guaranteed data service that curates research data with appropriate licenses so that it's available in future. And we don't have that in Australia. And so in the meantime, we have to shepherd our data through various platforms, ensuring that it's able to migrate from one platform to the next. And that's what we've done with PARADISEC over the last 22 years. So how are we improving access to and sustainability of this collection? Access is provided through an online catalogue, and it has an API feed to a number of services. I'll be talking about all of these in more detail in a moment, but also providing clear license conditions so you know what can be done with these items. And ultimately, what we want to be able to do is deliver these items both from the web, but also locally. And we do that, as Robin said, on Raspberry Pi computers locally. But sustainability is also about the bitstream preservation, having multiple backups, and using a Research Object Crate, again, something I'll discuss more in a minute. So we are primarily concerned, initially we were entirely concerned with tapes like these, cassettes and open reel tapes that were made by researchers in the past, so linguists, ethnographers, musicologists, and nobody was looking after them. And you can see the mold in the tape on the right, and increasingly tapes are getting more and more endangered themselves, and we risk this kind of situation when we play tape. So the National Film and Sound Archive here in Australia has a deadline of 2025, which is when tapes will be unplayable and playback machinery will become increasingly difficult to run. Of course, we're at that deadline now, so we're probably going to have to push it off into the future a little bit more. But I think the risk is very real that unless we do something to digitize all of these tapes, we risk losing lots and lots of information. So what we do at PARADISEC, we have a low temperature baking oven. This helps to re-adhere the magnetic media and the polyester backing. And you put a tape in there for a few days and then bring it out and you can clean it. And one of the other things that one of our whiz kids here has done is built this machine to lubricate cassettes. So cassettes kept in the tropics in particular dry out, and then the cassettes are unplayable. So this machine lubricates the cassettes and allows us to capture the signal from them again. So PARADISEC was established in 2003. We were really, as I say, concerned that many recordings were not getting back to the source communities. They were being held in people's offices or in their deceased estates. And these were really mainly from Papua New Guinea and the Pacific, because there was no agency in Australia that was responsible for them. So it wasn't the responsibility of the National Film and Sound Archive. It wasn't the responsibility of the National Library. So we just started digitizing them, thinking that there would be some national framework to take over this collection at some point. We've patched together funding from various sources, many from the Australian Research Council, but also recently the Australian Research Data Commons. We have a catalogue. We currently, the figures have gone up a bit since we entered this competition, and Robin read those figures, but 1,380 languages, 260 terabytes. So it's a significant collection. And it's recently been moved to Amazon S3 storage managed by the University of Sydney. This gives you an idea of where material comes from. So even though initially we were aiming at the region around Australia, once we built the infrastructure, people wanted to archive material, and people who work in all kinds of places and speakers of languages from all kinds of places recognize the need to archive, and there are very few digital archives around who can provide this service. So you can see we have material from almost everywhere in the world. Having said that, as you can see here in green, the largest collections are from the region, so Australia, China, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu have the most numbers of items in the collection. When we started doing the work, we were digitizing these tapes, and we wanted to get them back to the communities they came from, but with over 1,370 languages represented, it just wasn't feasible to go to all of those communities. So we worked with regional cultural centres like the Vanuatu Cultural Centre, Solomon Islands National Museum, Institute of Papua New Guinea Studies, and so on. And we returned recordings to them. But when we did that, they said, well, we've got all these tapes and we need to digitize them, but we haven't got the facility to do it. So we have started now digitizing tapes with a number of these agencies, going there for various reasons, picking up tapes, bringing them back, and then returning them to those agencies. So here's an example, the Yap State Archives. They had no way of playing these tapes. They had quite a number of tapes, and they sent us 120, for which we got a grant from UNESCO in Korea, which covered some of the costs of digitizing these tapes. This is the office of the Solomon Islands National Museum in Honiara, and as you can see, the walls of the office are festooned with tapes, many reel-to-reel tapes, many cassettes, but they don't have any playback machinery. So these tapes are sitting in Honiara, the air conditioning goes on and off, and they are in various stages of disrepair. And we have slowly been digitizing them, but it would be ideal if there were a big effort to just digitize all of this collection. We also work with students who are doing fieldwork. So here's an example of a student who was doing fieldwork in the North Philippines. And before she went out, we arranged a naming convention for her files. She was in a reasonably dangerous field location. She had to keep moving because of the danger of bandits in the area she was in. And so she would burn her recordings to DVD and send them to me in Melbourne. So we had a collection that was built almost the flip of normal archiving, which is done at the end of a career. This is archiving done right at the beginning of the research, giving her a citable form of her recordings when she came back from the field. We run a survey called Lost and Found, where we ask people if they have any collections of tapes or know of collections of tapes that need to be digitized. And this has been running now for 12 years. And we get responses. We then try and figure out ways of funding the digitization of these collections of tapes. So as I said, we have an online catalogue, which is pretty much as you would expect. But what it also allows is it allows users to assign other users to edit collections or items, so you can build the metadata collaboratively. And it has APIs which are picked up by a number of different services. So this is the various APIs, that is the way that our catalogue feeds information out. And it's picked up by Trove, which is the National Library's aggregation service. Research Data Australia, another one. The Virtual Language Observatory is a service out of the Netherlands, which picks up language archive material from around the world. The Open Language Archives community similarly harvests metadata from language archives and puts them together. So there's a page for each language in the world, and this is a page showing all the material for the South Efate language, for example. And this is refreshed every day by harvesting material from the archives. The reason that we've been able to run for 23 years is that we have a lot of automated processes, so that even if we don't have full-time staff most of the time, the archive can keep running. Depositors can still upload, can provide material which can be uploaded. So depositors fill out a deposit form that specifies the access conditions. They fill out a metadata spreadsheet or use the tool Lameta to describe their collection, and that provides us with the metadata to populate the catalogue. The depositor can determine access conditions, so items and collections can be either open or closed. Metadata can be private so that it's not visible to the public, and this could be useful when you're building a collection, that you don't expose it to the whole world, but you can give rights to other users even if an item is private. We have automated all of our checks, which we used to do fairly laboriously. Now with Amazon S3, we can have processes which automatically check the files, check file naming, and transcode to archival formats and delivery formats, so TIFF and JPEG, WAV and MP3, and so on. So using this automated process, we can deposit material now and it can be online virtually instantly. And this allows us then to keep operating with minimal funding. Now, I talked earlier about Research Object Crate. This is a format that's being promoted by the Australian Research Data Commons. It's a way of wrapping metadata and data together so that items are self-describing, and the collection at rest, that is the collection of files, is self-describing. So it doesn't need the catalogue to give it the contextual information that it needs. Research Object Crate uses JSON LD, so as you can see, it's human readable up to a point, and it conforms to schema.org. So it's doing all kinds of great, new Web 2 type things. So I think it's a very promising way of outputting from the catalogue into a format that allows that collection to be self-sustaining. So this is a view of the Research Object Crate material that is not looking at the catalogue. So it's just looking at the collection and the Research Object Crates, and it builds an Elasticsearch, so it sort of builds an index of that material, and then it presents it to you. So one of the exciting things about RO Crate for us is that we can search through the collection, not just the metadata. We can search through the text of the collection, and as you can see here, you can search transcripts of media, and that allows you to resolve to any chunk within the media, play that piece, cite it if you want to, but it gives a granularity of search which is much finer than the current catalogue does. And then you can search in the way that you'd expect. You've got faceted searching, and here on the right you can see this keyword searching through the catalogue, through the transcripts. And if the transcript is an audio file, you get that. If it's a transcript of video file, then you just see that snippet of the video file as well. This is a very powerful way of navigating the collection. And as one of the things we are very committed to doing is returning files to local cultural centres. One of the ways of returning files is to put them on a hard disk, but that is essentially a meaningless jumble of files without a catalogue. So what we can do, taking our whole collection, is if we decide we want to present just a small section of those files, so maybe everything that comes from a particular village or that comes from a particular language group, we can extract those files from the collection, and we can put them into a hard disk or something, harvest the metadata that's in them from the research object crates, and build a catalogue of just that sub-collection that we can put onto a Raspberry Pi, and that can then be used in a local area as a Wi-Fi transmitter. People can access it on their phones because they're more likely to have phones than they are to have computers with USB drives. So we've done this a number of times. The Raspberry Pi costs about $200, and you can refresh the collection just by putting a new USB stick in it. So it's proven to be very productive. Here are people in Iroquois village in Vanuatu retrieving information that's being transmitted just within that small area in their language, and they are able to download that onto their phones and share that with community members. So part of the sort of dialogic archive idea that it's not just the archive providing information, but that people provide information about those items back into the collection as well. So on the left is Stephen Gago, who works in our Sydney office. He's from Rabaul in Papua New Guinea, and he's been listening to a lot of the Papua New Guinea collection and adding really valuable finding aid information there. And on the right, a very nice example of people in Madang. So there's a big collection of tapes that we recorded from Madang in Papua New Guinea, and they took those recordings to the local market and asked people to listen and provide information to them, which they put on a spreadsheet and sent to us. Now, that doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's quite an interesting and exciting thing to happen. So what we provide, I think, is a virtuous circle. That is, the tapes that otherwise would just be sitting somewhere as analog lumps of magnetic media are brought back to life. They're made available for source communities. People can relearn forgotten traditions, perhaps, or they just hear their ancestors talking. At the same time, it's a great research method to ground your research in recordings and to cite your research to those recordings. And we've had example of people doing their PhD research first on a collection in PARADISEC before going into the field and having already had a head start learning the language from the recordings. And that's because these recordings have licenses that say how they can be reused. And what we have done and what we hope we can keep doing is collaborating with museums and archives in the Pacific so that we can help them to keep preserving their analog tapes. Thanks very much.